Good evening, everyone. I will now call our December 12th, 2023 regular meeting of the Board of Directors to order. Thank you to those attending in person tonight and those staying engaged by watching our recording at a later time. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the lobby on the table and turn it in to Board Secretary Kim Coven, seated at the end of the table on my left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. And before we dive into tonight's agenda, I want to take a moment and introduce those seated at the table with me. To my right, we have Superintendent Degner, Directors Abraham, Eastham, and Williams. To my left, we have Vice President Clausen, Finch, Lingo, and Board Secretary Coven. And with that, we will jump right into our agenda. First up, we have our student reps. And first, we have Kai and Oriana from Liberty High.
Hi there. As the 2023 year comes to an end, Liberty has had a few important events in the last few weeks. First, we had our winter showcase on December 2nd, which featured jazz choirs Amplify and Voltage, our jazz ensemble, our show choirs Impact and Storm, and various solo acts. Speaking of Voltage, through the first week of January, they will be attending the National Jazz Education Network Conference, or the GEN Conference, in New Orleans, which they will be representing Liberty as one of the top jazz choir groups in the country. Congratulations to Voltage.
Our other music programs have had performances as well. Our band concert was on December 6th. Our choir concert was December 11th, and they also collaborated with orchestra and band students, involving them by having them play background music. And then upcoming concert is the orchestra concert, which is on December 14th. On December 3rd, Liberty Difference Makers hosted Groovy and Bright, a family community event that had arts and crafts, an outdoor carriage ride, and more. This Friday, we will also be having a pep assembly where Voltage, and band and orchestra will be performing. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Cindy from West High. Is Cindy okay? Next up, we have City High, Lulu and Rose.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Rose.
And I'm Lulu.
First things is we'd like to invite you all to next Wednesday at 7, Choir and Orchestra's Masterworks. This Saturday at 3 and 7, the choir's winter show. And tomorrow, so this Wednesday, the winter band concert.
We'd also like to show off our one and only Kendra Schwarting for being our bowling captain and bowling a perfect 300 at the meet, which is incredible. So yes, we're very excited for Kendra. She's getting a lot of love right now.
What else? Oh, also girls basketball, shout out to them. They defeated the undefeated Marion, so now who's undefeated? I'm just saying.
We'll also be having a big pep rally this Friday, along with the City versus Liberty boys basketball game. There's also one tonight, which is why I got my little hot gear on. Is that where I'm going after this?
Yeah. Robotics has also been very, very active this week, competing in weekly competitions. And also, the Little Hawk is having their paper day this Friday, so go journalism.
Rose is very biased as the executive here. Yes. So a quick brag about Student Senate, which Rose and I are the presidents of, and this is our bragging moment. So the hunger drive this weekend, we got over 400 plus pounds of food and over $1,300 in cash donations. And all this money, the food's directly going to go to students, ideally students can take home this food over winter break when school lunch is not provided. And the 1,300 in cash donations, Student Senate has to vote on, but the idea is that also would go back to City High students in some way, which is exciting.
We're also going to be raising food this weekend, I think, at
North Dodge.
North Dodge. So if anyone wants to stop by and give a donation, that'd be greatly appreciated.
North Dodge Hy-Vee.
Yes,
specifically.
yes. Not all of North Dodge.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed it, yes. Also, our initiative, Free Senior Photos, has taken off, and Adopt a Yearbook is booming.
Yes.
Yeah. Around 40 students so far have requested a free yearbook. So,
And we can
yeah.
provide around 82, so that's really
Mm-hmm.
exciting. And
Yes.
that's money that Rose and I raised along with the Alumni Association. And
Mm-hmm.
then Free Senior Photos is Rose and I's trying to make sure every senior has a photo to submit for the yearbook.
Yeah. And a final shout out, our treasurer, Marguerite Frank, who's gonna be watching this video, got an A+ on her calculus test, which really inspires me for my calculus test tomorrow.
We have two questions from this. Love you, Marguerite. We have two questions from the student body today, which is, does the board plan on doing anything with the tampon dispensers or funding hygienic products across schools?
And also, Lucas, students are asking what happens if COVID ramps up again. And so a message, to like pass along would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, and I hope our student reps have a great night. Thank you for being here with us. Next up is our ICA update from President Brady Shutt.
Thank you, President Malone, Vice President Clausen, Director, Superintendent Degner. I'm Brady Shutt, President of the Iowa City Education Association. I'd like to do just a few thank yous tonight. The Standing Strong for Public Education Legislative Priorities document, as always, Kristen looks amazing. And I think it's a testimony to this board that you do go outside of IASB's recommendations a little bit to tailor a message that I think is appropriate for public schools and our community, and I definitely know that staff appreciate that. And I think it fits in really nicely. Laura Daly will do the presentation on mental health tonight, and thanks to Laura for that. And that really dovetails with one of our legislative priorities, as does professional development. So a nice shout out to our executive directors, Lucas and Eliza. They put on a really great PD at the Center for Innovation, and one of the newly revamped rooms that I think is going to be a fantastic room for professional development for our staff. And then also, of course, I want to give a huge shout out to, I think what makes us strong is our community partnership. So just a huge shout out in advance to Hills Bank and to the City of Coralville, both really longtime, very, very strong supporters of the school. So I'm thrilled to be here tonight with them as they get ready to present. And I know he's not here tonight, but just want to give a special recognition to outgoing City Council member Mitch Gross, who is, of course, also our principal at West High School, a longtime friend and colleague of mine and former co-president. He's put a lot of years into public service for the City of Coralville. I know he's going to be missed, but I know his legacy will live on. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up is the Hills Bank Classroom Cash Check presentation. I am not sure who will be handled. There we go.
Hi everyone, I'm Sienna Kaufman and this is Kenzie Hine, and we're proud to present the Classroom Cash to you guys today. Classroom Cash is a program that Hills Bank offers, and it allows you to earn money for your school district by using your debit card with us. So every time a purchase is made on your debit card, a percentage of it is donated from Hills Bank to you guys for whatever you choose to use. So from the program, since it started in 2004, we've donated about $531,000 to the Iowa City Community School District. And since the program started, we've donated about $1.4 million to all school districts. So if we could present the check to you guys and get a picture, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Oh, but I have to read the agenda. Thank you so much, Hills Bank, for that wonderful contribution. Next up, we have the RAGBRAI check presentation by the City of Coralville.
Thank you very much. I'm Kelly Hayworth from the City of Coralville, and I have with me our executive committee for RAGBRAI, Josh, Sherry, Kylie, Ashley, and Terry. And we just wanted to come here this evening and thank all of you. Without your buildings and grounds and staff, we wouldn't have been able to host RAGBRAI. This year, it was even more important because of the staff and your buildings. We were able to safely house all of the people that were in the storm that night. We had to cancel our main concert, but everybody within 10 minutes got inside somewhere, and we had no incidents other than some torn up tents. So we really thank you for being able to put on this major community event. We had hoped to be able to give you even more dollars, but because the concert was, and beer sales, unfortunately, were canceled, but we were able to split between the parks, Coralville Parks, that will be improving St. Morrison Park, and the school district will be splitting $56,000 between the two. So thank you very much, and I know Sherry's going to address some of the staff that specifically helped us.
Thank you. We, like Kelly said, we could not have done this without the partnership with the Iowa City Community School District, being able to combine our open spaces, both parks and school grounds. One of my direct reports was the Campgrounds Committee, and so we were watching the weather really closely all that week, and we really just appreciated the support from all of the staff. As we moved through the week, I want to just name some people because there are people maybe that don't always get recognized, but starting with Josh Cornwell with the physical plant and custodial staff. He was on the phone with me and texting with me from early in the day, and then about early afternoon told me that you guys had made the decision to put the custodians in the schools overnight without us even saying, yes, we're going to activate the plan, and can we do that? He was already on top of it. And then I want to just say a thank you to custodians. I hope I won't mess their names up, and we've got a little token from the RAGBRAI committee for each of them. Maricelo Lararo and Jason Fig at Kirkwood Elementary School, Scott Keyser and Richard Carlson at Coralville Central, and then Jack Marie Bayro Kosovic and Ryan Smith at Northwest Junior High. All of them stayed with us throughout the day, opened those facilities at night, made sure they were safe through the storm, and then I think all three of those schools housed people overnight when tents were destroyed. We also appreciate Chase Ramey, Ben Grimm, and Jeff Barnes for helping guide the process, getting us in touch with the staff. We knew exactly what areas to avoid, what areas were going to be under construction, and the process just went really smoothly. So thanks again.
All right, we have a check for $28,400.
Great.
And Terry has the real check.
Why don't I go like this?
Thank you again to RAGBRAI and the City of Coralville for that generous donation. Next up is community comment. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you are about to speak on. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. Speakers who make comments are reminded that they are responsible for their own statements and may be subject to legal action for those which include hate speech and that are threatening, harassing, or defamatory in nature. It is expected that speakers will address the board and each other with civility and abide by stated time limits. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. Speaker's time limit will be displayed on the screen above Board Secretary Kim Coven. The initial community comment period shall be limited to 1 hour. Remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, shall take place at the end of the meeting. The board will not engage in any discussion during community comment. The role of the board during this time is to listen. Any individual who does not abide by these rules or otherwise disrupts the meeting may be asked to leave and or referred to law enforcement. And with that, our speaker for tonight is Dina Bashara.
Thanks, I'll do my best to abide by the rules. Think I can handle it. Good evening. So I'm just here to highlight 3 items. Briefly, I have to touch on the issue of seclusion. The numbers as reported these past few years have been looking better, and I'm hopeful this trend will continue. However, I think it's unfortunate that this data is not included in the annual progress report, although Superintendent Degner did kindly inform me that it will be from now on. And while I'm glad to hear that the data will be reported out in January at a board meeting, I'm just wondering if the board's been keeping an eye on this data. So like, is it possible that there were 1 million instances of seclusion last year, but no one would know? So where's the oversight if we're only seeing data that is a minimum of 8 months old? And I don't know, maybe you've seen it, but I'm not aware. Second, mental health work group. Pleased to see that there is some reporting out happening tonight. I'll have to watch it on YouTube later. I was especially tickled to see that one of the slides on the presentation you'll see tonight includes a draft of an MTSS for mental health. While I, of course, credit the hard work of everyone on the work group, I just have to point out that I and others have been advocating for this very exact thing for years. Years! I've brought in speakers, I've emailed resources, I've harped, I've badgered, and I've got exactly nowhere for years. As I wrote in another forum, sometimes you feel like you're screaming into a void, but sometimes it turns out maybe the void is actually listening, so I'm going to take it as a win. Lastly, suspensions. Yikes! You guys, I'm assuming, have already had a chance to review the numbers. So it's instructive to note that the annual progress report lists Board of Directors goals and objectives on page 10. These include reduced disproportionality and discipline. On average, behavior referrals and office behavior referrals and suspensions will be as low or lower than previous years. And on average, disproportionality between subgroups and office behavior referrals and suspensions will decrease from previous years. I did some simple calculations, and here's what the data shows. Black students, who are 22.6% of the student body, account for 51% of suspensions. So they're being disproportionately disciplined by a factor of 2.25. FERPL students, who are 40% of the student body, account for 76% of suspensions. That's a disproportionality of a factor of 1.86. Students with IEPs are 11% of the student body and account for 35% of suspensions. They're being disproportionately disciplined by a factor of 3.18. 42% of office referrals are for students with IEPs. They're being disproportionately referred to the office by a factor of almost 4. Overall, this is the highest number of suspensions in the past 6 years. So my question is, what's the board's responsibility here? Where's the accountability? Is this the first time you've seen this data? Are you receiving quarterly updates? Further, what do you suppose these numbers look like for Black students with IEPs? FERPL students with IEPs? Will you be asking for that data? How closely are you or anyone else looking at this data? Are you seeing patterns? Are there schools that are making up a disproportionate number of these suspensions? Certain grades, These questions aren't meant to throw anyone under the bus. They're critical because you can't possibly hope to create change unless you actually have a handle on what the heck is going on here. So what is going on? Also, I think it's fair to ask, in the face of another dismal report on suspensions, is PBIS working? Are we just going to keep going with this? Where are these behaviorist approaches getting us exactly? Are these the results we should expect? Shockingly, I don't feel, not shockingly, these behaviorist approaches are either effective or much of the time ethical. But the thing is, it's not just me being some noisy busybody. The proof is right here in the data pudding. And these numbers are not just ink on a page. This, my friends, is a school-to-prison pipeline unfolding before your eyes. Thanks.
Thank you. That concludes tonight's community comment. Next up, I would entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Before we get to tonight's consent agenda, did anyone have any questions regarding the bills that were reviewed? Hearing none, are there any items that directors would like to pull from tonight's consent agenda?
I'd like to pull the Wood River Energy Natural Gas Risk Pool.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
The Wood River Energy Natural Gas Risk Pool.
Okay. Are there anything else that board members would like to have pulled? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda minus item 10, the Wood River Energy Natural Gas Risk Pool.
I move that we approve tonight's consent agenda minus item 10.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Okay, that takes us to the item that was pulled, the Wood River Energy Natural Gas Risk Pool. Director Finch.
Thanks,
That's a
President
mouthful.
Malone. Sorry, I know we have a long meeting ahead of us, but I just thought it was, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, Chase or Adam, but I just thought it was important to highlight this, so I don't know if you mind just telling the public what this is about and how this is going to help our district and our general fund.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to do that, Director Finch. So this operates a lot like our IPSIP insurance pool, and so we are basically a conglomerate with a number of other districts, and it allows us to pay a flat fee throughout the course of the year for our natural gas, and so they're able to distribute that cost across the various districts in the pool. And because of how it's articulated as a potential risk, we're allowed to utilize a fund other than the general fund to pay for this. And so it's something that we believe is a benefit for the district, not just from our month-to-month costs, but also our overall budget perspective. We were very happy when Adam brought this to us as something we can utilize as part of our utilities moving forward.
Great. Yeah. Any additional questions, comments? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the Wood River Energy Natural Gas Risk Pool.
Second it.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up are our public hearings, and the first one is the West High 2024 roof replacement project.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2024 West High roof replacement project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on November 28, 2023. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on November 29, 2023. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. December 19, 2023 at the Facilities Management Conference Center, 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on November 29, 2023. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
I will close that public hearing. Next up is the public hearing for City High 2024 roof replacement project.
Now is the time and the place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2024 City High roof replacement project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on November 28, 2023. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on November 29, 2023. The district will receive bids on this project at 2:30 p.m. December 19, 2023 at the Facilities Management Conference Center, 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on November 29, 2023. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
Thank you, Vice President Clausen. I will close that public hearing. Next up are our policy reviews, and we have the third time seeing the 400 series policy primers and fiscal management policy. Director Finch, I believe you last chaired those meetings, and I wanted to check, were there any additional comments?
No additional comments. I did want to note Director Williams' suggestion, which we all agreed was a good suggestion, of declaring the meals provided with our change of adopting the federal GSA per diem rates. I don't know if that needs to be changed in their actual policies or if that's more of an admin guideline.
That's what we talked about. Yeah, sorry, on the sidebar there, but Director Finch, I think we just will process that as an admin guideline, and we'll just operationalize that change.
Okay, all right, great. Next up, that takes us to tonight's discussion item, the mental health work group. Superintendent Degner.
Yeah, and sorry for the late notice on this one, but we're going to change gears on your suggested change in gears. The main focus of tonight's update had planned to be provided by Dr. Bardoshi, which, she's with the UI Scanlon Center for Mental Health, and she's fallen ill. And so what we'd like to do is we wanted to leave the content there as we learned of that today so people could see the update and the progress, but we'd like to come back to that the first meeting in January so that Dr. Bardoshi could be here to present with our team. She really led a lot of the research analytics behind some of the data analysis and how we got to the recommendations, so it felt like it'd be kind of a miss not to have her here and explain that process we went through.
Are there any concerns from directors about tabling that until the first January meeting? Okay. That takes us to tonight's presentation, the annual progress report. And Dr. Ramey?
Sure. Well,
Okay.
good evening. We are very pleased to provide the annual progress report this evening. If you saw the narrative that we attached to the board item, it probably looked similar to the past, but it also looked a little bit different. And if you recall the conversation we had before the ops annual report last summer, we see this as an opportunity not only to talk a little bit about our challenges, but also highlight the successes that we have had this last year and really where we're focused for next year. And as we did with ops, members of our executive team, Eliza and Lucas, are going to provide the slides, but of course our entire teaching and learning team is here this evening to help answer questions during the discussion period. And this isn't meant to cover everything in the APR, really to highlight some pieces and then just generate that conversation with the board. So with that, I will turn it over to Lucas and Eliza.
Thank you. All right, good evening. So Lucas and I have the privilege of just kind of going over the APR with you and just sharing some of those highlights. So we're going to kind of take it in 3 separate sections. We're going to give you an overview Just a reminder that this is a district overview from the 22-23 school year. So we'll also provide just throughout our presentation a little bit of the work that we've been doing throughout this year in relation to some of the results we saw last year. We'll go through and give some department highlights and some goals from our teaching and learning areas, and then we'll open it up for an opportunity to ask questions. Thank you. Throughout the evening and the presentation of the report, we're hoping that you see some direct connections back to our work within high reliability schools. And so tonight, we are going to try to make those connections for you and hope that throughout the report, you're able to see some of those connections as well. So we wanted to highlight those 3 levels that we are committed to as a school district. In level 1 of safe, supportive, and collaborative culture, that is where we've spent a majority of our work, both professional learning and on the ground with our teams to make sure that our schools are safe, supportive, collaborative spaces for all of our students and staff. Level 2 is effective teaching in every single classroom, and that is the work that we are starting to embark upon as an administrative team, as our instructional coaches, our teachers, and our staff have gotten a beginning, just a little bit have gotten their feet wet with it, but that's really what we're going to be taking to our staff predominantly next year. And our goal for that is that our district will have a model of instruction that we use to define quality instruction in our buildings so that teachers can self-assess and continue to improve. And then level 3 is work that our curriculum team is currently doing, and then will eventually next year be some of the work that our principals and our coaches are doing, and then hit the classrooms with guaranteed and viable curriculum where all students have the opportunity to learn the same content and all teachers will have adequate time to teach the required content. And so we will try to make those connections throughout the evening and our report of how it connects back to HRS levels 1, 2, and 3.
Brady, appreciate the comment earlier. I wish you all had the opportunity to see the great work that was going on we had about 120 staff members there last week, including teachers, administrators, IDS, curriculum coordinators, building admin, district admin. It was fantastic. Just a great cross-section of our work, and as Eliza explained, HRS guides our work, right? So we're working to make sure that our leaders, both administrative and teacher leaders, feel comfortable enough to take that back, which ultimately impacts the learning of our students, right? So it's exciting. I'm glad that you saw the benefit in it as well, and we've received a lot of great feedback with it. Also, if you remember last year, we talked about the creation of our district strategic plans. We wanted to make sure we give an overview of how we are progressing towards that 5-year strategic plan, looking at our goals of equity, proficiency, and growth. So I'm going to do my best to not get so long-winded trying to explain the numbers here, but at least get an overview of how we're progressing. Again, this is over 5 years. You need some really good areas of celebration in addition to some areas of growth for us, both as a systems, a district, and building level. So the first of the strategic goals that I want to focus on is looking at our equity goal, which is all about reducing the gaps between our subgroups, looking specifically at proficiency in the areas of reading and math. All right, so this is where I'll try my best not to lose you here, okay? Because if I was to include all the data here, this would have went through 2 or 3 slides. So what I did with the numbers there, you see the R represents reading, the M represents math. And that number that you see there is the reduction or the change from our information on our proficiency levels last year to this year. All right, so that's my goal of explaining that to you as best as possible, okay? So hopefully you don't see a whole lot of parentheses. Parentheses would be where we did not necessarily decrease with our, yeah.
It's where the gap maybe
Thank
widened.
You. I won't get you lost in the numbers, but I'll get you lost in some simple words. So, so we can take a look specifically at our ELL demographics. You can see there we made growth within our achievement gaps between our ELL and non-ELL students. And then when we take a look at our IEP status, our students with an IEP compared to our students without an IEP, you see that reading, we did not necessarily close that gap there. We widened just beyond 0.5%, but then increased by decreased the gap with our math goals. You can kind of see something very similar, where we have very similar numbers, one where we did not necessarily decrease the gap with reading, but we did decrease the gap with our math numbers, so just over 1.3 or 1.34% respectively. When we take a look at our subgroups, these are all comparing these subgroups to our white students. So when you take a look at our Asian, our Black, African American, Hispanic, and our multiracial, our Asian students compared to our white students only specifically in the area of reading, that's the only of those subgroups and our only test where we did not see a decrease in the achievement gap. So again, we want to emphasize the fact that this is a 5-year goal, right? We're not going to get this perfect over 1 year, but that's going to guide our work both at a district level and at a building level. Our next of the strategic goals is looking specifically at proficiency. So our goal was to have 80% of our students would score proficient based upon the ISASP over the course of the year. So you can see where our numbers started at. And again, this was our baseline information from last year. And you can see what our proficiency numbers are based upon our test last spring. So our math proficiency at 69.81 and our reading proficiency at 72.75. So well on our way towards getting to our 80% achievement with proficiency over the next few years. And then lastly, growth. I want to take us back to almost a year ago when Amy did her best to explain growth, because this was a confusing point. I think she often used like the big line of students, right, and trying to figure out exactly what that meant. So Liza and I this afternoon were like, all right, we need to make sure we have a clear understanding of what this growth means. So bear with me as I read to you what kind of the website stated, okay, because I think it's extremely important. So student growth over time is comprised or compared to his or her academic peers. Academic peers, so that means they're at the same level or same grade level, but then it's also at the same achievement level. Okay, so we're not looking at students based upon different achievement levels. So if Eliza and I are in the same achievement level, that's what we're using as a comparison for growth, okay? So if we lined up 1 through 100 students, oops, sorry. I'll also do my best not to knock anybody out. 50% was right there in the middle. So we want to see at least half of our students make that growth that we expect. Our goal, we did not settle for 50%. We've set our goal for 60% of our students meeting that growth area. When we take a look at our numbers from last spring, our growth of our students in the area of math, district-wide, was at 54%. And when we took a look at our numbers from last year, the numbers from the 21-22 assessment was 52. So we made some improvement in the area of math. Our growth with our reading proficiency, would be 52. So again, a little bit of work with our goal, with our numbers from the previous year was at 55. So again, some work that we need to do, both in the areas of reading and math, but we're excited about the work that's progressing towards our strategic goal. Number one, I just want to highlight the fact that we have this here, right? We focused a lot of time and effort on the strategic plan last year, and that's for the exact reason here. All right, so as we take a look through our different departments, thanks to our directors and executive directors that are out here. Again, we're just highlighting the work that they did. That large report speaks to the amazing work that them and their teams are doing along with our building. So we're going to take these one at a time, not necessarily read everything that's on the screen, but speak to a couple of things with highlights and goals. Curriculum, instruction, and assessment with Carmen. One of the things I want to highlight is the work with our priority standards, K-12 wide, making sure that we understand and our staff members understand what it is that is the most important things to teach within the classroom. Then also, I think it's important, you figured out what you need to teach as the most important. Now we need to figure out how we're going to assess. So our goals is continual work with those proficiency scales and ensure that there's a common understanding of all of our teachers in our system about teaching what's important. And once we've taught it, students have done it, how can we properly assess them to make sure we know our next steps with them? Next is our area of equity, and Director Howard did a great job at our last meeting, but I just wanted to highlight again the equity walks. We had just a few buildings, as he had communicated, that took advantage of the equity walks last year. And our goal is to have every single one of our buildings participating in it this year. We want to focus this back to our HRS level 1, right? A safe and collaborative culture for our students and for our staff. The equity walks do just that. They provide feedback to our leaders. They provide feedback to our staff about things that they can do to make sure that students are seen within the building. So I want to continue to highlight that amazing work that's being done. And that just serves as one example of a lagging indicator, looking at level 1 as our buildings are going through certification. And it's all about proving and then improving. It's not about showing that you're perfect, but it's about proving what you are doing and then improving upon that for future years. So we're excited about that work with Laura and her team as we get it into more buildings and as they do the appropriate follow-ups with the staff members and administrators to make sure that they're doing the important work that needs to be done for our kids.
All right, the next department that we wanted to cover is learning supports with our director, Laura Daly. And some of the things that we want to highlight coming out of there is just that that deep work with our multi-tiered system of support, MTSS, and especially with our social emotional behavioral health through PBIS, that direct connection back to level 1 and that safe, supportive, and collaborative learning environment for all of our students. And then just continued professional development for staff with SEBH, different ways that we are utilizing our SIOP, which is our Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol for our ELL students, and also just good teaching for everybody in the classroom, and starting to make those connections with NASA, which is the new Art and Science of Teaching, which is the instructional model that we will be utilizing in level 2. And so starting to draw those connections, because the last thing that we want is for teachers to feel like, oh yay, here's a new thing. They're going to teach me how to teach. I already know how to do this. That is absolutely not what we're doing. We're taking instructional practices that are best research-based practices that teachers are already doing, and we're identifying them. We're calling them what they are. We're understanding how do we assess ourselves? How do we then do deliberate practice around this is the goal that I want to get better at because it's going to meet the needs of my students, and then providing coaching and just consistently looking at how we are teaching and what results we're getting from there. And so our learning supports team has done a really great job of starting to make some of those connections with our SIOP instructional routines as well as NASAT, so it doesn't feel like this is something new. And then in our special education with Director Reedy, who is ill, so she's unable to be here tonight, but we wanted to highlight some of the work that they've done with just supporting and promoting increased student independence. As we know that when we have our students that have some of the largest barriers to learning and may have some educational disabilities, we want them to be independent and to be able to every single day increase their ability to be able to make decisions on their own, to be able to be supported and have resources for them. And so we have done a lot of work both in professional learning with student independent mapping, trying to fade out some support that they may need right now so that they can start to be more independent. And so that is something that has been really exciting to see our teams when we're going into IEPs, is to think about how to fade support or to think about how to increase student independence. And then continued goals this year are around targeted learning for our teachers. We have targeted professional learning for our teachers, our special ed teachers, various different ways over the past few years, but really listened to feedback from teachers last year and the year before that have said, we feel like we need something that's really tailored to this or to this part of our work. And so that's something that Director Reedy has really taken to heart and taken that feedback and offered a lot of different differentiated professional development for our special ed teachers to make sure that they are growing in an area that is maybe a little bit more unique than some of our colleagues.
Next is our Student Services Department with Director Callahan. This is an example of what we did today with our building admin, is really focusing on the attendance procedures and making sure that in order to teach students, you need them in your building. So we did a lot of work with attendance, and that's been a main focus of Kate, as she has made herself available both with her and her team to get out to the buildings to best support. So try to streamline the process as much as possible, create that building ownership to make sure that students feel valued and supported and understand the barriers that may exist with students when they're not at school. And once we identify those barriers, do the best that we can to remove them so students are in the classroom and students are learning. So it was a really great opportunity for us to collaborate around that today. I wish you guys could have seen that as well. You should just hang out here and see the great stuff that's going on a daily basis. So, and again, just focusing on that attendance piece as far as our next steps. And we know that this is not necessarily a new endeavor, but chronic absenteeism continues to be a problem, not just in Iowa City, but across the country, especially after COVID. We struggle to get our students back into the same routine of making sure that they're at school on a consistent basis. So Kate and her team will continue to not only collaborate with the Johnson County Attorney's Office, but also making sure, and more importantly, that our buildings have the supports and the systems that they need to make sure our students and families feel supported and they're at school.
All right, now we're going to take a little bit of a turn and talk about the Iowa School Performance Profile. So the Iowa School Performance Profile is something that is released every year by the Department of Education, and there's two different components in it that help us just demonstrate our accountability measures. And so this first slide that you're seeing here, and if you have an opportunity to click on the links in here, this part here, that is a live link, and so is this, that will get you to the entire school district's performance profile, and then you can actually drill down below and go into every single building's performance profile. But the state of Iowa, the Department of Education, classifies in 6 different categories, and these are the categories. I think if I scroll, you can see it a little bit better. These are the 6 different categories that buildings are designated as. And so you'll see we have one building in exceptional, high performing, commendable, a couple buildings in acceptable, needs improvement, and comprehensive. We have one secondary building, Tate, and that comprehensive. And so these occur every year. We are given a new status by the Iowa Department of Education, and then they combine that with the accountability measures for ESSA, which is the federal school accountability system, which is Every Student Succeeds Act. And then there are some designations that buildings are given in relation to how they scored on the Iowa School Performance Profile. We have an appendix that you can look at the end of the presentation that shows the different weightings for how a school is identified in these categories, but we have a majority of our elementaries were not designated, which means that they will just continue working on our district school improvement process. 2 of our secondary buildings have no designation, but then we have a few elementaries and some of our secondaries that are targeted, and they are targeted because of a subgroup. It's a subgroup scores below the cut score that is determined by the state, which is 44. So if you get into the report, you will see what that actually is. And so we just wanted to show you that these are the 2 different ways that our achievement data, as well as like our conditions for learning survey, attendance, our growth, proficiency, are all used to determine how well we are doing compared to other districts and compared to other schools within the state of Iowa.
When we take a look at our next steps, those buildings that are targeted or anything below that are required to do certain actions, both with the support of our Grant Wood AEA partners, as well as anybody from the state that helps support those as well. I say that, like that's the requirement. However, the process that buildings go through when they are targeted or comprehensive or needs improvement, those are good just foundational pieces to reflect upon what's going on in your building and what you need to do to improve. So it's a really intensive support process, but what we found is important is for not only those buildings to do it, but also all of our buildings to do it. So we took nearly all, I think except for 1 or 2 of our buildings, to go through that entire SAMI, the self-assessment of the MTSS and multi-tier systems of support implementation. We took every single one of our buildings through that, and that's an intensive day. That's 8 hours with an hour little lunch break. But your team, we have teams of administrators, counselors, IDS, administrators, all part of that team, and they go through multiple things of looking back upon, reflecting about how their building is operating. Not only student achievement, but also looking at the leadership of that building as well. It was an amazing process, and it's something that we're going to continue this year because it causes the building to reflect upon what they're doing and then the next steps to make the goals, to make the improvements that they want to see. It's very labor intensive. It's very scripted, which is great for educators. We can't get off task there. It's very scripted. It's a great process, and it's something that we're going to continue to do. I also want to reflect back on the data review as well. As the buildings, we're going to look back on our data from last year to make those goals as well. So we'll be doing that with all of our buildings beginning in February, all of our elementary and secondary buildings, even if they're not targeted, not required to do it. We think it's an important process for our buildings to go through. And obviously you can see those buildings that are targeted, it's a little bit more intensive support. Even though we have everybody participating in those previous 2 activities, those targeted buildings have a sequence of events and sequence of supports that they're receiving on a consistent basis to make sure that that action plan is being followed, and not only being followed, but making sure that if there's supports that need to be provided from a district lens or from Grant Wood AEA, we've got those identified so we can talk through those next steps as well. And then when we take a look at those comprehensive schools, again, that layer of support is is added up on there as well. We had one of our buildings last year with our online learning program, and as you can see, they not only in addition to Grant Wood, but they're also supported from a member of the Department of Ed through the state. And then they have a little additional requirements looking at mandatory monthly meetings as well as a book study that they're doing, looking specifically at how to provide virtual instruction to our students.
And then we also have some district level involvement. So every year we do a resource allocation review, and we just make sure that the resources that we are allocating are actually meeting the needs of our students and of our buildings. And so we did that last year, and we'll do that again this year. We have monthly check-ins where we monitor progress towards action plans. We plan out the implementation, just how things are going. We work closely with our partners at Grant Wood AEA in order to do that. And then we also do a root cause analysis where we look at all the different summary statements and action plans from all of the buildings. And then we identify areas that we want to look at and improve overall as a school system. And so Lucas had touched on this a little bit earlier. One that we had identified was attendance. Again, if our students are in the buildings, we're probably going to have a better chance of meeting their needs that way. And so Kate and her team has done an excellent job of just revamping our attendance system and making sure that we're really meeting the needs of the students and the families. We've already seen growth in our attendance just this trimester of the school year, about 2% district-wide. So that's really great for us to see that growth so far. And then leadership was also an area that was identified as a priority. The criteria changed from the previous SAMI to the new one, and so that was why we had kind of identified that there were some changes in that, and it's looking at your leadership team, not just the building principal. And so again, our efforts with HRS is really targeting where we wanted to go with that. And so that just kind of sums up all the different things that we are doing to respond to the data that we see in our Iowa School Performance Profiles, which is very similar to the data that you're seeing in the APR. Before we open it up to questions, Lucas and I are just the ones that get to be the face and the voice of all the great work that's happening at the ESC and at the building level. I think most of you know that Lucas and I spend a majority of our career as building principals. Our building principals and our teachers are the ones that are doing the work. And so we just couldn't be more proud of the growth that we've seen in our system just since adding high reliability schools 1 year ago, is that real inception of that. And just the amount of work that we've seen people put in day out to increase the achievement and the overall school experience of our students is incredible. And we are just the fortunate ones that get to stand up here and present that hard work that they do. So just open up to any questions.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation. Directors, do you have any questions, comments? Director Eastham?
Thank you. It's a very encouraging and impressive report and an analysis and the breadth and scope of what you want to accomplish, what we want to accomplish as a district is awe-inspiring. I do have something I wanted to bring up in terms of curriculum alteration or adjustment to consider the requests from community members about what we may or may not be including in our teaching for students. I was looking at, looking at page 5 of your presentation under department highlights and goals. The sidebar shows curriculum instruction and assessment. So I'll try to phrase this in a way that's comprehensible. It's not always my strong suit. We have received a number of messages and communications from community members, parents, in the last several weeks about both contemporary events in the world and in the state. And we also are committed to addressing curriculum matters that have been brought to our attention before, involving are we teaching history, social studies in a way that's comprehensive, fair, and empathetic. So is there some way that this scheme that you're describing here can assure us that those questions and recommendations that are brought to us can be included in what's happening in the classroom when that is appropriate, and when it's when we can do that at appropriate grade levels. Is there some way that we can assure the community and me that we're set up to incorporate those recommendations and concerns that are brought to us during the course of the year and outside the usual curriculum review process?
Director Eastham, you're speaking straight to my heart because I'm a former social studies teacher,
Oh,
but I
great.
also learned the power of delegating as well. So I'm going to see, because we are so fortunate to have Brady Shutt here with us, who he is a master with us and working with the teachers through this particular, the specific things that you just mentioned.
I'm aware that Brady is in the audience.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Director Eastham. I think that the thing that I encourage our teacher teams to do, and I know that Director Gwenagali does the same, is to, of course, be anchored back to your standards. And in social studies, our standards are open enough that, we, encourage social studies to be both rigorous and relevant. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities with world events or local events that happen every year that we don't anticipate to weave those into what we're doing in social studies classrooms. And, my encouragement has been to work within your building level, teacher collaborative teams so that you are all making sure you're addressing things in a fair, sort of balanced way. You're connecting back to your standards. You have a clear sense of what your student outcomes want to be, and you give students, voice and choice in what it is that you're talking about and how they go about talking with their classmates and with you. So I hope that we're doing that. I think it's challenging. I mean, there's no question about it. These are, very sensitive topics, and they're things that I think are best addressed with, for teachers when they're working, with a team, so that they've thought about it in advance. And, I encourage them to stay in communication with their administrators as well as they do that. I think when you start to, so I'm hoping our classrooms are like that they are responsive to what's happening, and I think that they are. Yeah, so I guess that's sort of how we approach it. The way that you would go about it, I think your question sort of is, how do we make sure that we can do that more systematically? I think that's what our professional development is about. I think that's what every teacher is meeting weekly with a PLC collaborative team, and that's true in social studies. And I think that's where those things are going to start to come out. We have Thursday district level curricular meetings where we might talk about that as well. So I think that's probably the mechanism and the avenue that we would use on a year-to-year basis. And I feel like it's stronger now because we have weekly collaborative team meetings at all of the buildings, which I think you saw more in your, in the elementary schools, not as much in secondary schools. And I think now that we've implemented that, I think we're going to see a better outcome outside of the, the curriculum review process that might happen every 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Thank you very much. It's encouraging response.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for your presentation tonight and all the work that you're doing for our district. We all know that last year was a very difficult year. You look at the numbers of nursing visits that's detailed in the APR, and the visits for depression and anxiety, I think, were doubled. If you go back several years before that, for comparison's sake, even tripled. And so it's no surprise that there were more behavior issues. And so I'll just address the elephant in the room, and that is our discipline numbers, our referrals, our in-school suspensions, our out-of-school suspensions were much higher than they have been in the past. And as you said, kids need to be in class to be able to learn. And so I guess I will just offer this as an opportunity for you to comment on, what are we doing to try to turn that around, and and to address the disproportionality, and could we get more frequent updates, perhaps at the trimester schedule, to kind of keep better tabs on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think one thing that I think is important to point out is last year, we tried really hard to re-roll out our systematic approach to how we enter office referrals. And so our office referral reporting was much more consistent across PK-12 last year and this year than it had been in the past. I can throw it over to Lucas to kind of talk about the secondary push in having a systematic way to report our office referrals. In the elementary, we used to use a paper form. And so our reporting was only as good as the people that would fill out the paper form. Then we kind of moved into Google Forms so that we would have an electronic version. And a few years ago, elementary moved into putting things into Infinite Campus. And so that had been something that elementary had been using. And insert secondary.
Yeah, I would say the same thing with secondaries. A lot of buildings were using the data through their own databases, but that doesn't give us the ability to kind of see and identify trends across our district and across our system. So that was one thing we talked with our administrators about last spring, and they did some heavy training with their staffs the summer before the school year began to ensure that everybody is using the same system so we have a better opportunity to identify the trends of behavior. And then we look specifically at those majors and minors, not necessarily the suspensions were being reported. And that's why we saw some discrepancies between when behaviors happen. A lot of our responses as buildings were dealt with suspension because we weren't documenting some of those other major and minor behaviors. As far as looking back to your question about looking at the discrepancies between our numbers, it's nothing that we're not well aware of. And so there's one response, right? Is once behaviors happen, what do we then do next so that behavior does not happen again? Like that's a very important strategy to try to put students in a position to be successful. What's even more important is making sure we try to do as much preventative work as possible, and by teaching our skills, teaching the skills to our students to try to identify those things that are going to happen before they lead to those behaviors. And that's work that we're continuing on, specifically at a secondary level system, is identifying what happens in our Tier 2 and Tier 3 systems. Once we have students identified as having behaviors, what are we going to do both as a support staff, and what can we then implement in the classroom to try to curb these behaviors before they become extreme, where a student is either administered with an in-school or out-of-school suspension. Director Finch, I'm not sure if that answered all your questions, but I would also open it. Yes, Executive Director Gray.
Yep. Hear me okay? Okay, so kind of like what they said, the numbers are gonna be higher because we're recording it appropriately now. But just from the equity lens, just to be transparent about some of the things that the team has been doing, we get alerts that come to our email for every suspension throughout the district. So when the suspension happens, the team gets alerted. We follow up on some of them, especially when we see we're like, okay, what happened? This kid again. We usually will reach out to the AP or whatever to see if there's something that we can do to offer our supports, to see if there's another lens that we can provide, so on and so forth. But I will tell you, and this might not be what you want to hear, but the majority of the majors, the suspensions, are pretty legit. It's disproportionate, but it's for fighting, or it's for possession. It's for major things, or it's for bullying and harassment at the elementary. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's for things that we said that we were taking stands on, and not. It's the zero tolerance stuff. So it's either physical fighting at an egregious level, possession, or bullying and harassment. We've eliminated the petty stuff. We've done work over the past 3 or 4 years to take away a lot of the subjectivity, to take away it being about defiance, insubordination, and disrespect. Does that make sense? Because that's what was getting us in the weeds. Mm-hmm. So that's a non-factor, thank goodness. Now what we're looking at is kids in crisis. We're looking at kids of COVID. We're looking at students who some are, they're because of their mental health needs, they don't their behaviors on top are so egregious, they don't know how to cope. Right? And then some kids, they're suppressing and they're doing other stuff that we don't know about yet. Do you see what I'm saying? So unfortunately, our kids are all kind of going through something. It's just that the behaviors on top are our Black kids. That's what's happening. Like, so we've been down this road, we've been over it. We need more mental health supports. We need some more therapists. We need things that cost money, maybe some grant money. You know, we're trying to be as creative as we can with what we have. But we've kind of identified the point is that we're trying to make our disciplinarians therapists, and they're not. And so we know we need more resources. We need to figure some things out. But I'll tell you, like, it pains me, you know, it pains the team, but we're like, that's pretty, like, what did they do? Oh man, dang.
So can I follow that up with another question? Because I know that we're really working hard at that. And we're really wrapping our arms around our students. And do we have any idea about this year? What is the data looking like so far? Are we making any improvements this year compared to last?
So this year's gonna look high already off the cuff because we're recording it, like they said, we're all on the same page, so we're making them record everything. So all the majors, there's no internal systems anymore. So there, I don't wanna say it like this, but there's no like hiding of data. There's no in-house data versus district-wide data. It's all district-wide data so we can see. So this year might look extremely weird. It's not gonna look the best this year. Does that make sense? So I don't see it looking necessarily better this year. This is like our starting point. So we can try to work on it going forward. Does that make sense? That's just from what I'm saying, especially because of the suspensions that we're looking at are like legitimate, like aggressive physical fights and possession. And you know what I'm saying? So like, unless we figure out a way to like, you know, put our students in rehab, because it's all coping.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? Because the possession that they're trying to cope.
Can I ask one more question? And that is just specifically about the tobacco, the 29 out-of-school suspensions for tobacco. So is this an issue where students are skipping class, they're kind of in the restroom vaping, they've been caught multiple times, and I wonder if anybody could comment on that statistic there.
Director Callahan can.
Okay.
Say, actually, I've met with all of the secondary schools, and we did review their first try suspension data. I think what we're seeing is we're still seeing an increase of the office referrals, especially at all grade levels. There is some good news as far as the first try data in the secondary schools is actually decreasing at, I think, every school that I've met with, so in all of our secondary schools overall. And so I think that's more promising. And there's a great interest between the administrators that we've met with in coming together and reviewing that data. The one thing I'm hearing is very similar to what you're saying, Director Finch, is that reacclimation to school has been challenging after COVID, and getting back into that routine has been particularly challenging. I think they're starting to feel that they're gaining some ground this year in those areas. But I would say then when we do look at suspensions, what we're seeing, those suspensions are pretty egregious, the types of behaviors that we're seeing. And even though students may be suspended, that length of suspension district-wide has really decreased significantly when we look over, like the length of time a student is out of school has decreased significantly over, I would say, like the last 10 to 15 years. And as you know, our district just has not done expulsion, hasn't had an expulsion since 2012. So I mean, there's a lot of things that are going well in that area. And we do have a team that is planning to meet to review the data. And as far as the controlled substances, there's a group that's looking at alternative to, in lieu of potentially a suspension in that area, or even we may not see a big change in that data if we put in that intervention, because they're still thinking, oh, they may, because it's so egregious, they may need to be out of school, but maybe not as long as the family is willing to engage in this type of educational program that we're looking at. So there's a lot of conversation in that area as well with the schools.
You know, we received an email this week, and I think all of us got it, and something that stuck with me is that the person that was writing it said, I have no doubt that the people who are out of school suspended did something egregious. And I think for the most, that at least really resonated with me. And so my perspective is I don't think that they're not egregious violations. I think that that they are called for the disciplinary. And I talk to my husband, and I hear about what's happening in our schools. And but the point the email made and what resonated with me is, are there things that we can do, and Director Gray, you touched on this a little bit, are there things we can do to help these kids before they get to the point of committing the behavior that is not acceptable? And, you know, part of me, I think the stat is they only spend 18% of the year with us, right? And so the vast majority of their time, they're in this other universe, and maybe those are a lot of contributing factors for the behavior that we're then seeing at school, and some of it's out of our control. But are we working on things that we can do, because the pile of money isn't gonna fall from the sky, but it just kind of puts us in a tough situation to know, you know, what to do next, because I bet it would be great, right, to get inpatient substance abuse treatment for some of these kids, and I know we don't have money for that, and the state doesn't have money for that. So are there, I guess, a long roundabout way, I'm channeling Charlie, of saying, do you think we have some things that we can do to make the situation better?
Well, Director Williams, that's something that we're trying to do in asking our staff to be more empathetic, be more patient. It's a long game though. Like, it's like, well, we can't ask them to be therapists, right? Like, what they really need is clinical therapists. We need them on hand. We need them we need grants. We need grant money that we don't have to give back. You know, we need some grant writers in the house, you know, like more grant writers. So like that, like we can imagine and dream together and try to figure it out, but we do have people on the grounds trying to figure this out like weekly, like just so you all know, like this is something like, okay, well, what could we do? What can we ask them to do? And and in our walkthroughs, in our equity walkthroughs, the classrooms feel more restorative. That we're watching students have more empathy one to the other without teacher prompting. You see what I'm saying? So there's something that is connecting. Something is sinking through. Do you know what I'm saying? There are good things happening. What else can we ask? I don't know. You know, so like that's the piece where it's like maybe we do need a think tank about what next. I don't feel right in good conscience to say, and now here's a curriculum on how you can then DBT this situation. Like, we can't ask the teachers to then small group. You know, like what they really need is an amount of mental health supports that might be possible, but our teachers just aren't trained. They're just not that. You know, we could call them that, but they're not that, and they're not that, like, respectfully. Right. You know, so we're asking them to be more restorative. We're asking them to teach empathy. They've been trying to do those things. We're asking them to be more patient. Our team is pushing in and like inserting themselves in spaces and being like, would you reconsider this? And they're listening. Do you get what I'm saying? Those admin are listening to like the equity team be like, okay, what you got? Yeah. They're playing with us. Do you get what I'm saying? Like we're in community together on behalf of our kids.
And I also want to brag on some of the work that Executive Director Gray's team has done. A lot of the conflict that occurs in our building doesn't happen out of nowhere. We're often either families make us aware, other students make us aware, or we can just see based upon our professional or experience in a building that there's conflict that could possibly occur between buildings. So I think when we talk through what's important moving forward is to continue those strong relationships between school and home for families to, because parents don't want their students out of school either, but they've got to come to somebody that they feel supported that's going to help their kid through this rather than being reactive and responsive and they only hear from them after they have to come get them from school. So, I mean, Laura's team has done amazing work when we start to identify when possible conflict could occur. He's either working through circles with students or working through groups with students. And it's amazing some of the things that they've been able to curb just for students to be able to see the perspective of somebody else, not hear the hearsay that's going on between students, or just thinking of something that happened on social media and then their first reaction is to respond with conflict. So I think it's, again, we're not, fortune tellers, but a lot of the things that happen within our buildings, there are some things that happen that lead up to those things that we, as a system, need to focus our efforts into making sure that students are being taught those preventative, and we put them in a position to be successful.
And Executive Director Polchacek, thank you for mentioning families, because as Director Williams mentioned, we have our kiddos about 18% of the time, and the majority of the time is spent with their families. So my question is, what are we doing to really bring those guardians and parents into these situations when we have students being suspended and sometimes repeatedly suspended? How are we directing? I mean, is it a way for us to direct them to additional community support programming? Because obviously, as Executive Director Gray has mentioned, we don't have the money to do everything and to be everything, but it's important that we equip or at least direct our families to places to allow them to support their children.
Yeah, and we actually have improved that, and I'll toss it over to Director Daly if you want to talk a little bit about Care Solace and what we've been able to provide through our student family advocates.
Sure, we have the mental health services that were initiated through the district for our SFAs primarily, who are interacting with families and are aware of student and family mental health needs typically. Certainly our school counselors are a part of that as well. But our SFAs have taken the lead in providing the service, which is mental health therapy and a range of supports and services. And it's just the thing that Coordinator Corrine Frank, who also oversees this, says to me on a regular basis in interacting with the SFAs and reporting on the usage and the feasibility of it is we call it kind of a warm handoff when an SFA is aware of a potential need. Of course, that choice and that agency is always within the family to be able to determine timing, to be able to know when and if that type of support is appropriate for them at the time. But we're seeing consistent usage. We're checking that information and that data regularly, and it's K-12, it's at all the schools. And so that is really helping in whether it's a difficult, potentially disciplinary situation and conversation with family, or because of a whole host of other reasons that families can benefit from that student or family support. So Care Solace, it's new to us just this year, but it's been a really great resource that we've been utilizing. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you.
I was wondering, and thank you for your presentation. I was wondering if you could, because you said that, and Laura, you can answer it if you feel free, or anybody else, that with these suspensions, if you look at it, physical violence and harassment, and somehow physical violence is different from fighting. Physical violence and harassment are very nebulous terms. What typically qualifies under those kinds of suspensions?
Mm-hmm. The harassment is more like discriminatory harassment. Bullying is bullying. So it could be cyberbullying, or like a person who's physically keeps kicking a person's chair and they've been told to stop and they're doing it as a power dynamic, or teasing and they won't stop, or spreading false rumors. Those are sorts of things under bullying. But the harassment is the discriminatory harassment. Those are things like, if you're being harassed because of you're from a protected class, like because of your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, your religion, and so on and so forth. So that's the harassment, bullying side. Physical aggression is just straight up fighting. Physical fighting.
But it says physical violence and then fighting are two different categories on the chart. So physical violence is still fighting.
Physical violence could be like that maybe that's one person does something and it's not mutual back and forth. So like you could bop someone in the head, and that's physical violence, versus an actual fight, two people are engaged.
I know as a teacher, if a kid threw a chair, I might call it violent. Not at a kid, just threw the chair. I just know that, filling these out, sometimes you're like, as a teacher. Is that a major? Is that a minor? I don't really know. Here's what I appreciate. One, moving a system like this is turning an aircraft carrier, right? We've used that analogy for years. It just takes time. So nothing in this system can move on a dime. Here's where my confidence is. We've turned the aircraft carrier. We've got it in a direction. And now we're all moving relatively in the same direction. One of the key points is we are reporting the data. It used to be there wasn't even a handbook. There wasn't even a policy about how principals dealt with it. It was just like, you're the principal, deal with it. That was the policy, just that. And that wasn't that long ago. Then we got to the point where we have a handbook and we've got discipline, and now we're finally, I think, we have systems in place to track this where it's easy for folks to then look at the data. It's electronic. The expectation is everyone will do it. We're coming to an agreement on terms, which is a really difficult thing. I don't think we're there yet. Some of it, right, is the state's going to define it for you. Some of it is really is going to be subjective. What I like is that we are getting that out of it. What I don't like is that we're seeing the violence. I mean, I teach in a school, and I see things that are like, wow, like, oh my, it's just frankly not safe for anyone. Certainly not the people involved, right? And that is just also disproportionate. I teach in an urban school. It is disproportionate. It's racially disproportionate. I assume it's income disproportionate. That's not data I would have access to as a teacher. And so then here's my question. Well, a couple more comments. Another thing, every time someone asks a question, you guys have an answer. Here's what we're doing. Here's where we're going. Here's what we want to go. Here's what we're missing, and here's what we need. And everything I hear about what we need has, I think, a lot to do with things that are completely out of our control. COVID, the economy, people's general dissatisfaction. So what I wonder with the data is, and is this something we could see, how do we compare with the other urban districts in the state? How does our data hold up against there? Are we dramatically different, or are we relatively similar? So that we understand this isn't an Iowa City specific issue. It's an issue, and we know these are serious issues. But is it more of an urban district issue in our state? And then nationally as well. Is this something that's happening on a broader scope? Because my sense is, and what I know is, schools are always asked to solve these problems, right? But where does the city come in? Where does the county come in? Where does the state come in? All of these people play a role. We can write grants. We could hire grant writers, and that will be a Band-Aid for a few years while we continue to write the grants. But some of this is systemic. There aren't enough mental health services in the state of Iowa. We are, in fact, the worst state, or one of the very worst states for mental health supports for students. Schools are not going to solve that. Like, we just cannot come up with enough. We have to recognize that we are asking teachers to do things all of the time, way outside of where they got into their profession. Probably a reason it's hard to hire teachers, because they weren't hired to be a therapist, but they know they need to. And teachers have this empathetic heart where they're going to do what they're needed to do, and then you will burn out trying to do things that you have neither the resources nor the training to do. So some of this with the data, okay, let's recognize what of this is an Iowa City thing and what of it is in our control. And I feel really confident that we're tracking that and we're seeing where this is going in our control. And then some of this is going to be advocacy outside of us. It takes a village. It takes a nation. There are things going on that we are going to need support for. Maybe we'll get it in the state, maybe we won't. But if the data helps us tell that story to the right people, I think that's really important, so that we don't keep all of us as a board and then piling on to admin and then piling on to teachers, and all of that weight ultimately is on those shoulders. And so I think just the recognition, hey, we're asking teachers to do these things. We are seeing people be more empathetic. When we talk about restorative justice, that is not just, hey, this is going to be how we're going to do discipline. This is just how we do things. We just do circles because that's the way kids learn one another. Because what's going to stop bullying? Kids not being bullies. That's really what's going to stop it, is a kid saying, you know what? That's a crappy way to behave. I don't like it. I don't like how it feels. I recognize that other person is a person, and that will really end it. And that's the data I think that will be helpful for us to see as we say, oh, Are these restorative practices working? Can we track that somehow? I wonder, a couple things I'd wonder just of the report. Is it possible to pretty simply provide just a year-to-year graph for us on some of this stuff, just so we can see the trend lines, just for us, right? So we can say, oh, over the last 10 years, here's how it's gone. And then when we see that blip in the data because we're reporting, maybe that helps us understand where those blips are coming from. And then I wonder if we could quickly see a comparison to the other UEN districts or a comparison to even similar districts, college towns in other states, right? So that we have a little bit of an apples to apples comparison about how we stack up, and maybe an understanding, wow, this is really an Iowa City specific problem, what are we gonna do? Or, this is a national trend, and it's not to give up on these issues. It's not to say, it's COVID, we're not gonna worry about it, but it's just to understand it better so that then we can ask you folks to really target your efforts to do what matters. Sorry I get heated about this, but I do live it every day. And I do understand that schools are dealing with so much that is outside of our control, that we need families. And when families are struggling, we can't solve all of those problems, but if we can lead them to resources, and boy, how much better we're doing that now than we used to. Before it was like, oh yeah, we should think about that, and we should come up with something. Now it's like, well, here's what we're doing, here's where we wanna go, and here's what we need. So sorry for the soapbox a little bit there, but I do get fired up, and I am excited. Even though the data doesn't seem like it's changing very much year over year, it seems some of the discrepancies are very similar to what they've been. What I know is the practices underneath are really changing, and some of them, even when you got that aircraft carrier turned, now it's like, well, how do you keep it moving? How do you keep it going in that direction? How do you make sure you're on that right path? And even with all those changes that were happening before, to me, HRS, I think it's going to help us understand things better because we're going to have better data. Because the truth is, discipline is connected to proficiency, is connected to learning and achievement. All these things are, that none of this is happening in isolation. So having all of this data and focusing where we need to on student achievement, all of that other stuff is going to feed that and help us just be this safe, supportive learning environment for all of our kids.
Yeah, so two things and kind of two thank yous and then a quick response to what JP says too. So I would say, first of all, thank you for the way you talk about it. And thank you to JP for using the aircraft carrier analogy, because one thing I was just going to encourage us to do is kind of, take up 30,000 foot about where we were at maybe 10 years ago, right? And some of the things we were talking about, which will make some of the comparisons you're asking for a little difficult. We don't know if people have done that work. We don't know if they have those same definitions, how they're necessarily categorizing the referrals. And so to give a true apples to apples, even in our own data, what we're recording today is a lot different than 10 years ago, right? So I do think there's still value in that, but that's why we've avoided in the past putting this into that report. But the way you talk about it is so important because you're really asking people, as you heard from Laura, I think as you heard even from Brady with some of the content pieces, you're trying to create an open space where people can be vulnerable to try things and fail, right? And if we talk about our data in an accusatory way or in a way that's negative, people want to please their superiors, right? And so you're going to get funny things that happen with the data. You're going to get lack of reporting. You're going to get people not referring kids to the office when they should be. So how we talk about it and how we ask questions is so critically important to what happens on the ground in our classrooms. And so I really appreciate that context from you guys because I think that's been a culture shift even from my time here at central office, that we can have this conversation and not question that people are approaching this with bad intent or that they are okay with the numbers they're seeing, because that's not what I see in our school district, right? People understand disproportionality. They understand what we're trying to do to fix those different issues. And so we've shifted from a different vision and mindset of just saying, well, these are the policies, here's your zero tolerance discipline, to knowing why that might not be good, and then getting in a room and collectively writing policies we can agree to then still knowing that we're still seeing disproportionate results, and what we do to try to proactively work with students to prevent them from engaging those behaviors. But once they do happen, we also can't have a system without consequences, right? We still have to have a system that supports a safe environment for all. And so it is a lot of work. It's heavy. No one's necessarily pleased with all the data points, but how that conversation starts here is so important for the work our folks are willing to do and engage with and be open with us. And so I'm going to let Lucas and Eliza sit down. If you do have questions, of course, we're always still going to answer them, but thank you for just the way you approached it tonight.
Any other questions, comments from directors? Hearing none, that takes us, and thank you again for the presentation and for answering our questions. That takes us to tonight's action items. First up is the 400 series policies for employees. Are there any discussion, comments, questions regarding that policy? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Move that we approve the 400 series policies.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is policy primers. Are there any questions or comments, discussions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Move that we approve the policy primers.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next up is the fiscal management policy. Is there any questions, comments, discussion? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the fiscal management policy.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next up is the program of studies. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion?
I did actually want to open this up for Superintendent Degner to just publicly kind of clarify the changes that are occurring in the math curriculum in the middle school level, so that the community can better understand this.
Yeah, we got a few questions on email, and I think folks were a little bit thrown for the with the name change. And so I just, again, would want to reassure people our acceleration sequence is the same. Students will still have access to those opportunities to take algebra in 8th grade, even some select few geometry in 8th grade. What traditionally has been called pre-algebra is really now worked more into the language around a condensed 7-8 course because of the standards. It's really more reflective of an overall math course rather than just a pre-algebra course. So it's really just a change in name on the program of studies that they're seeing as they enter. And so whether it's incoming 5th grade, or that will be 6th graders, or 6th graders that'll be 7th graders, all of those same opportunities will still be there to students. So as I've addressed those through email, parents I think have understood, but thanks for the opportunity there, Director Finch.
And just a follow-up to that, I wonder, would it be possible, just for transparency, to kind of put specifically what, and of course it's not going to be perfect, but what the criteria will be for that acceleration and double acceleration into the program of studies, so parents are aware?
Yes, I
At least
think.
the pathway?
What?
At least the pathway?
Yeah, the pathway we can. I would say there's a couple of things I was remembering some of the way we responded to you guys on the document today, that some of these things are under development because of our transition to the website, or they would have probably appeared in the document already. And so some of that's as we move to the new website, trying to get those images down. And so those pathways, yes, of course. I think from the criteria conversation, some of this will also be assisted with the fact we haven't done registration yet for families, right? And we get it communicated through there. So I think we can work to include those different elements in the program of studies, similar to how we have in the past. You saw a more abbreviated version with the format here at this round of it because of the transition to the website.
I had a question about at the high school, Algebra 2A. Was that named something else? And is Algebra 2B going to happen for the kids that took 2A this year?
You want me to take it? Yeah, okay. So, yes, it's a rename of Algebra 2A to Conceptual Algebra. Yeah, and so, again, this is really back to some of our transition to more students having access to Algebra 1, and then the same thing through Algebra 2. And so this is another compliance piece for us to work through with the state, that the Algebra 2 course that they're actually accessing in line in law with the standards if we're giving them a math credit for that third year of math. And so it's a change in name because of some of the way that course will be structured and flowed through. We were a process point, if you're hearing from teachers, we're supposed to have a meeting with them on Friday, and we have an exceptionally high number of absences on Friday, so not all of those meetings have happened yet with the individuals that are maybe impacted by that course they teach. I will say that the ones I've heard back from, it's been received positively from the folks that have had the meeting and looked at what that course is going to entail moving forward. And so that's, of course, a lot of direct work with our specific math teachers.
So what about the kids that took Algebra 2A this year? What do they take next year?
Do you have a specific answer to that one, Carmen?
Is there an Algebra 2B by a different name, or what's going to happen to them? So in the future, we'll just have conceptual algebra, not a 2A and a 2B, but conceptual algebra is kind of like 2A. Yes, okay. I guess the other thing I wanted to clarify is getting all the way through Algebra 2 in high school, is that a district initiative or is that a state requirement?
It's not a district requirement. Oh, well, it is because it's a state requirement. Maybe it's the better way to say it. It's not a district initiative, as you were saying. So state standards are Algebra 2. And so that's been a constant conversation with our math folks to help them understand that that's not really an option for us, no matter what our feelings about Algebra 2 standards are. That is through the Iowa Core, the state standards with the state of Iowa.
So it does say to graduate from high school in Iowa, you need to get through Algebra 2.
We're responsible for teaching those standards, and then our graduation requirements have to be reflective of those standards. The state doesn't give us a list
of... I gotta think about that. I'm not sure I understand.
Well, the state doesn't give us a list of courses you have to pass, right?
Right. So you wouldn't technically have to get through Algebra 2. You'd have to get through 3 years of math, but if you did Algebra 2, you'd have to do the state standards, meet the state standards to pass Algebra 2.
Well, right, because as we're even talking about it, we're talking about Algebra 2 like it's a class, and we just talked about a different course name, right, that is going to meet those standards that'll count as the third year of math to count for graduation. So the requirement is really on kids having access to those standards. Of course, they talk about sequences and units in Iowa code, but not specific to course name.
So somebody could take Algebra 1, Geometry, Consumer Math, if it was so offered.
They wouldn't have had access to Algebra 2 standards.
They don't have access because they didn't sign up for it. You're saying they have to sign up for Algebra 2 or conceptual
They would have to sign up for a course that reflected the standards of Algebra 2.
Okay.
Superintendent Degner, moving a little bit closer. I was just wondering if you could help me understand how access to honors geometry works.
Yeah, I'm going to let the team talk some more here because this is specifically their work. So instead of me just going back and forth with you guys, I'll have you guys take that one.
I'd say that I have a 6th grader starting next year. What kind of courses would they have to take at 6th grade at North Central Junior High?
So they can have geometry in 8th grade.
Yep. Sorry, that was loud. Yep.
Can you hear me okay, or do I need this?
Yeah. Can you use that?
Okay.
Thank you.
That will be our double accelerator program for our students. So they'll be taking that condensed math 7-8 in 6th grade. And then they'll take Algebra 1 as a 7th grader, and then Geometry Honors as an 8th grader.
Thank you. Yep. I just wanted to point out to the team that came up with this course catalog. I mean, the courses are great. You have a lot of great choices in there. I mean, you have choices from intro to handyman or handy person to digital media, engineering and STEM. And when you look around at the school districts surrounding Iowa City and the private schools, they offer like a fraction of what we're going to offer in the middle schools. I mean, we are the only school in the district that is still offering French in middle school and junior high. The only district offering high school science in the junior high, middle school. If we can get it in all of our middle schools, we would be the only district, our school in the area with language arts, 8th grade honors. And we are only one of the 2 districts in the area offering geometry in 8th grade. So, I mean, great job on coming up with this middle school curriculum guide and program of studies to give people actual choice within our middle schools.
So one thing I just want to clarify, since we are being recorded, and if people are listening to this, I was just sidebarring here with Director Abraham, and so I'll just say it out loud for everybody. So in Iowa code, you're given your sequences in units, right, that the district has to be compliant with. Our compliance piece for standards is really through the desk audit process, and that's in CASA. And that's where they do an analysis of our courses and what standards are being offered. And so in that that's why also this program of studies is important, in that we do submit that through the desk audit process, and they are checking districts to see, are you giving kids access to those courses? So that's why a 3rd year of sequence, when Molly asked here about a consumer math, wouldn't meet that requirement, right? If they saw that was an appropriate sequence to graduation for kids in our district, that wouldn't pass the test for them through that desk audit process. And so that's their accountability mechanism to work through us as a district on. And yeah, I think that was the only other follow-up there that I felt like I didn't answer very well.
I did want to echo what Director Lingo just said about the middle school program of studies. I think I texted Matt after I reviewed it because I actually got a little emotional because the courses, I mean, it's just what our middle school needs so much. And we just finished this huge discussion about discipline and mental health, and, you know, respect begets respect. And what that program of studies in the middle school shows me is that we are respecting our students by giving them classes that they are interested in. And so it's my hope that that will translate also to improvement in our discipline numbers and, you know, improvement in our achievement scores as well. So again, kudos to everyone who put together that program of studies. I'm really excited for our students to experience that.
You know, you saying that, Jane, it kind of leads me back like to Portrait of a Graduate. You know, that we started that process, and it got messed up with COVID, but that initial meeting, 150 people, something like that. It was tons of students, and I was there. And one of the key components was voice. And Brady mentioned it too, that you give students choice and voice. And I think that's what we're seeing, right? And that goes back before COVID, and we're continuing that work, and it's aligned with those values. And now it's reflected in a course of studies and, frankly, a middle school model. I mean, there's really big systemic changes happening because some students and some community members and teachers and admin came together around a table with a process and said, here's what we think a graduate from Iowa City looks like. And all of this work has followed that. And we're doing lots of this detail stuff, but that's what feels really good to me, not just that the course of studies looks, I mean, it's exceptional. We are holding ourselves to a high standard. And this is why I always feel comfortable that we're going to compete, that we're going to outcompete area public schools and certainly area private schools, that we're going to draw folks in and really offer the best thing we can. But it's rooted in this work that's been going on before a lot of current board members were here, but with a different superintendent, and the work continues. And that's this piece about the aircraft carrier and the 30,000-foot view, is that here we are, different people in different roles, but we're all moving towards this, really the same vision, and it's all about that. It's all about what students have access to. And I know when I was in school, and nobody was listening to me about what I wanted to take, and it was very predictable, and it was not very good. And it's just, I just appreciate it that we can see that, and that, you know, that here are the results that we see, and then we hope, you know, obviously it shows up in the data, including that discipline data.
Any additional comments, questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve, entertain a motion, not that.
I motion to approve the program of studies.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next up is the resolution to approve application for modified supplemental amounts for open enrollment out. Was there any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the SBRC application for modified supplemental amounts for open enrollment out.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next up is the resolution to approve application for modified supplemental amounts for LEP instruction beyond 5 years. Is there any discussion, questions, concerns? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the SBRC application for modified supplemental amounts for LEP instruction beyond 5 years as presented.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is the request for modified supplemental state aid for dropout prevention. Are there any questions, concerns, or discussion? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the modified supplement amount application for the dropout prevention program.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. And our last action item, I would entertain a motion for the settlement of case number LACV 082157.
I move that we approve the settlement of case number LACV 082157.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
That concludes our action items for tonight, and next up is the legislative updates. You will see on the agenda that our legislative forum dates are listed. They will be Fridays in January, February, March, April from 4 to 5 in the back of the boardroom, and attached is our one-pager that we used last year, and just checking to see if everyone is okay with this or are any updates needed. Okay, hearing none, I'm gonna move on to director liaison reports that I forgot to submit. But I did stuff in November. I don't know if anybody wanted to comment on things that they took part in.
Actually, I was very curious to hear about your and Chase's presentation at the ISB conference.
We nailed it.
Awesome.
I mean, actually, it was a very good presentation. Several board members from Waterloo, and I think he was from West Des Moines, actually had some really great questions. There were some interesting questions about whether or not our non-use of SROs meant that we, sorry, I'm laughing because I laughed at the question, that we encouraged our teachers to open carry. I'm like, no, what state are you in? But, yeah. But I think we had some great feedback. People were very interested in just the board's relationship with administration and how we have been able to work productively together over the years to get us to the point where we actually able to talk about other things regarding, not regarding active shooter drills, but the overall safety of our students and our buildings. Dr. Ramey?
I think you summed it up. Thanks for the board's support in letting us do that. And it's an important issue, and the feedback was good from districts around the state about what we were doing and how we appeared to be forward-thinking. And it's always a good opportunity for us as administration to keep that top of mind and to go out and share that message. And we're all aware of the unfortunate incident we had at one of our elementary schools earlier in the month. And, we had just done that work. And as a safety team, we had just reviewed all that work because of that presentation. Then we had an opportunity to do one of our several debriefs today with our admin council over the same material. And as we go share that message out publicly, it becomes more ingrained in what we do. And as we shared there, right, students are, what was our tagline? That students are our passion, but safety is our priority, right? As we talk about what we're doing around school safety, because it is so critical that families feel like that we are taking their students' safety as a top priority when they entrust them with us every day. So it was a great opportunity, and appreciate you asking, and just something that we're very passionate about in the work that we do.
Great. Any additional comments about director activities? Hearing none, it takes us to agenda setting. On December 19th, we have an education meeting that will focus on high reliability schools. We will start at 4:30 and we will be at the back of the boardroom. So right here in this building, looking forward to it.
President Malone, we'd actually like to host you at the Center for Innovation if we could do that on the 19th. So we'll get you in a space over there.
I am so sorry, that's right there. My apologies. So we will actually be at the Center for Innovation.
How's the parking?
So that's a good question. So you park what would be behind the building. We kind of consider the front entrance on Dubuque Road right there behind the fire station. But if you go around to the backside, there's a larger parking lot, and that's actually going to be the long-term main entrance of the building. So you park in that back parking lot and come in that entrance. We'll be on that entry level right there for our meeting.
And now that, is there signage there, or will, okay,
There.
great.
Just out front.
Just
I mean,
up
on
front.
the-
Okay, but not on the turn. Okay.
Did you say 4:30?
Yes.
4:30, okay,
Yes,
great.
4:30. And on the 9th, we have January 9th of 2024, we will have an operations committee meeting at 5 o'clock before the regular board meeting, and the topic of discussion will be sustainability. And that will follow our board meeting, or will be before our regular board meeting, which our standard items are listed on there, but we do not have discussion items yet. But we will have a presentation on annual enrollment, class size, and demographic report. We will have the mental health work group. That will be the discussion item for that night. Are there any other topics that directors would like to potentially see at this meeting or future meetings, depending on the team's availability or parking lot items?
I continue to have an interest in having a response to members of the community and students about events in the Middle East. I suspect I had a call from a Iowa City Council member earlier this week, and they're apparently going to make comments at the at this January 9th meeting regarding events in the Middle East now. So I wonder if we could arrange, and I think we've had some discussion before about possibly arranging either a work session or a discussion agenda item, at least to review what has been suggested and recommended to us and what concerns are of students. And I don't know if I would like us to pursue that, if that's possible.
Superintendent Degner, for the team to be able to address what some of the buildings are doing to sort of keep students safe and address their concerns. Is that something that we can discuss at either the 9th or a future meeting?
Yeah, the only thing I would caution you with, I was gonna say this at the end of agenda setting, I mean, that basically leaves us with 8 days because we'll turn around and come back and have a meeting with you guys. And so depending on what you're asking for, right, I mean, we have just some limited time here to turn that around for you before break, and then knowing we have to have agenda pretty much ready to go and buttoned up before we leave. I do think we could have a conversation about some usual things we try to do to keep students feeling safe. You know, we talked some tonight about bullying and harassment, discrimination, all of those policies, procedures. I mean, that would be something we could highlight at a January meeting.
So maybe the second January meeting under the equity update, would that allow the team time?
Sure.
So that would be January 23rd.
Right, okay, all right.
Anything else from directors? Hearing none, first I would remind you that we have operations after this, so we will take a 10-minute break to allow people to stretch your legs, and then we will meet at the back of the boardroom. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. And those who are staying for operations, see you in a minute.
10.